On behalf of CFD, I want to welcome everybody, particularly Zack and John, who are going to be presenting to us, and John Boylan will introduce them. The only announcement that I have for everybody, we have our big June luncheon on the 20th, next Thursday. Jack Potter, President and CEO of MWA, is our speaker for that event. So if you haven't registered yet and can attend, you can do so by going to committeeforDulles.org and registered for the event. Now, if you've not been to one of those, it's great. He, on an annual basis, kind of gives us the MWA perspective on what is happening with both Dulles and DCA. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to John Boylan, who is the chair of our legislative committee. John, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. Hey, just as an introductory note, Scott sent out an email to folks or posted it on LinkedIn. 2 million people passed through the Dulles Metro stop. 2 million. That's amazing. And I get folks going, oh, well, okay. I go, no, 2 million. You want to do business. How do you touch them? What do you do? Committee for Dulles. We've been here since the 60s. We understand the airport, the economic impact. Everybody talks about the regional impact. And we've got folks with us today, and Zack and John, who are going to talk about it. They recognized it. I know, Scott, you've been there doing it as an elected official and now with Committee for Dulles. But thinking about what we needed for economic development in terms of the folks in the Senate and the House, what we needed down in Richmond. And when I look at Comstock did up and down the Metro line, they had faith in what was going to happen. And so it's really important. It all starts and is connected to the airport with 2 million passengers, 14% increase in international business travel. It's back. Federal government's not back, right? And Zack will let you talk about that. But the fact is we got 14% increase in international business. I think it was Goldman Sachs, significant new private equity investment they opened up, almost doubled what they had from last time in the billions of dollars, which means more investments and lots of M&A will happen. I've already seen some of it trickling out, which means opportunities for us to relocate. We already have a number of Fortune 100 companies. So I just do that as a way to kind of throw that out there and the importance of what's happening right now, why this is timely. And so I'll start with Zack, and then we'll go to John from Comstock. But Zack, thank you for Senator Warner, all that he's done. Really interested, especially in the regional level, because we have the ports, and the port's got a lot of attention with Baltimore and what happens if something goes wrong. I know that's an impact. It's a regional impact. We are a regional impact, but we're just looking for your thoughts and ideas from what's happening on the Hill. Thank you, Zack.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. And just a quick plug for the upcoming lunch. Jack Potter's been a great partner over at MWA with us on IIJ implementation, so I'm sure he'll have very good comments for everyone. So why don't I just start real quick with kind of rewind back to the beginning of this term for Senator Warner, the 117th Congress. I'll talk about 4 pieces of legislation that passed then. Talk a little bit about what's happened in the 118th Congress, the last year and a half, and then maybe we can just sort of open it up for discussion. Happy to talk about economic development or whatever's on folks' minds. But we came in 2021, and the first thing that happened obviously was the American Rescue Plan. Virginia in particular used a lot of the American Rescue Plan driven surpluses to invest in broadband, both at the state level and the local level. And so I think one of the positive outcomes, hopefully by 2025, 2026 from the American Rescue Plan, is that we'll be among the first states, with every address connected to high-speed, affordable broadband internet. It's sort of a race between us and Louisiana, and I like our odds. So that's a positive thing for the American Rescue Plan. Then, we really pivoted to the infrastructure law. Senator Warner was among the key negotiators in the infrastructure law, and I think it's turned out to be a great piece of legislation for Virginia. I think, first and foremost, it reauthorized WMATA. It had a long-term reauthorization for WMATA. I believe it was 9 years. So that certainly gives a little bit of the certainty that they need to, sort of make investment decisions going forward. Secondly, we're in year 3 of 5 right now of IIJA infrastructure law implementation. So we are going to have for another 2 fiscal years elevated funding levels for a lot of these surface transportation programs, which I'm sure this group is very familiar with. We've had a lot of wins in terms of our airports with formula-based funding for runway improvements, for concourse improvements, et cetera. And so you can expect that to continue over the next 2 years. We've had some pretty compelling local wins too through the infrastructure law. I think the first and most notable is the Long Bridge expansion with rail. That was a multi-$100-million investment from the federal government. And what it's really going to do is alleviate a lot of the bottlenecks that connect other parts of Virginia into the broader rail and Amtrak system. So very, very compelling development there. Next we got it was a little bit smaller of a grant, but helped finish the job on 64. Senator Warner's been talking about finishing the 64 expansion since he was running for governor in the early 2000s. And 20 years later, we got it done. So helped get it done. And the General Assembly obviously put up a very significant portion of that funding as well. So, traffic will be a little rough this summer, probably next summer. But after that, it should be a lot easier to get certainly from Northern Virginia to Hampton Roads. And the last piece, just to note, and there's a lot of interesting things in the infrastructure law. Happy to talk about any of them in more depth, but Virginia did submit its plan for its EV station network, and so I believe all those are still under review right now at the federal level. But again, that's those are long-term investments that should be paying off, certainly in the future. Then, Congress went to the CHIPS and Science Act, and, Senator Warner was one of the original co-sponsors of, he and Senator Cornyn were the original co-sponsors of the CHIPS and Science Act. Seen a lot of fab investments across the country. Unfortunately, Virginia, we haven't had a lot of, shovel-ready industrial sites that are big enough for what a lot of these companies have been looking for lately. So we've seen that investment kind of go to Arizona, Texas, New York, some others. But I think over the long term, it should still create some opportunities for Virginia in that I think some of those communities that got those initial investments are seeing some of the workforce challenges in the CHIPS and science space. You have to have a very highly educated workforce to be competitive there, and Virginia has that. So I hopefully over time, as we continue to invest in our sites, hopefully we'll be more competitive for some of that investment. But one of the other components of the CHIPS and Science Act was what's called tech hubs, and this is really an opportunity, a program designed to bring the economic growth associated with technology investment to communities that are not your major metropolitans, so not Northern Virginia, not Boston, not Silicon Valley, New York, et cetera. And Richmond did win one of those designations, and there was another project out in the New River Valley that got a grant to continue studying, whether they can be competitive in the future. So, although we haven't gotten a fab out of the CHIPS and Science Act, we have, used it as a way to sort of stimulate new interest and new development in Virginia. And the last thing just to note on the 117th Congress is the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know, I think you guys had probably right outside of Dulles with the solar project that Dominion did. I think Senator Warner was there for the ribbon cutting last year. One of the more significant solar projects in Virginia, and from a land use standpoint, it felt like a very good fit. Solar panels right outside of the airport. So the Inflation Reduction Act, through some of the tax credits, production tax credit, investment tax credit, has stimulated a lot of new investment in this energy transition, which might be a good thing to come back to as we talk about economic development next. The 118th Congress obviously has been a lot, I think it's fair to say, a lot less productive than the 117th. there was a period of legislative activity, March, April, May, where a number of important things got done that had to get done. First, in March, passed the fiscal year 24 appropriations bills. Critical that we pass appropriations bills for Virginia and not continue to do CRs. CRs really set back, I'm sure as this group knows, Virginia, because agencies aren't able to start new projects, make new investments. And so certainly for our contracting community, it's critical that we have those appropriations bills in place. So it was a positive development to see that get done in March. Then in April, this was, Senator Warner had a big part in this as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. There was a FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act reauthorization for 2 years. And also there was, legislation to look at changing the ownership structure of TikTok. Happy to talk about that if the group's interested, but from a national security standpoint, those were 2 things that Senator Warner was very supportive of. And then in May, again, I'm sure as this group knows better than anyone, the FAA reauthorization passed Congress. I would say that was probably one of the more disappointing developments, over, Senator Warren, probably over Senator Warren's time in the Senate, to be honest with you. He, I'm sure as his group knows, pushed back very strongly against, the expansion of slots at National Airport. From where it started, an additional 20, 25 slots or whatever it was to where it ended, which was down to, I believe, 5, which round trip. So 10 new flights all in total. Felt pretty good about getting that number down, but still, Senator Warner continues to have significant safety concerns about DCA and its ability to handle that incoming traffic. Obviously, for those of us who live in the region, the traffic outside of DCA, the infrastructure around there just cannot continue to support expanded slots. So, it tried to get a vote on it. Unfortunately, the leadership wouldn't even permit a vote. And so, Senator Kaine and Senator Warner were both enormously frustrated with that. But we move forward, and they're working on implementing the FAA reauthorization as we speak. So, with that, happy to turn this more into a discussion and answer questions. I guess one thing to end on though is the energy transition. The Inflation Reduction Act created a lot of incentives to stimulate this energy transition across the country to non-fossil fuel emitting sources. In Virginia, we are kind of seeing probably before a lot of other communities in the country, sort of a bottleneck as it relates to electricity demand. A lot of that's driven obviously by data centers. And so, here in Virginia, we're going to have to, figure out some of these, energy challenges first. And I certainly would bet on us to figure it out appropriately first, but, it's going to take investment, obviously, and continued investment in wind and solar, but it's also going to have to probably require a look at investment in nuclear as well. And Senator Warner's a strong supporter of small modular reactors and continuing to invest in that technology and potentially deploy it. He kind of approaches this from a national security standpoint, where if the United States doesn't engage in this market globally, what he's concerned is that China and Russia will kind of continue to use this as an economic development tool with developing countries and get them into sort of long-term contracts around nuclear deployment. So it's one of those things that can certainly be used as a geopolitical tool, but it's also can help us here in Virginia resolve some of these energy issues as we go forward. So I think that's something over the next few years that you'll certainly see him working on. So with that, happy to turn it more into a discussion and answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Zach. As people are thinking of questions, I want to go back to the DCA. Again, appreciate your support. It's really disappointing, but I think my bigger concern is what happens if the Senate flips. The numbers are so close. I really worry about, it isn't just FAA reauthorization. It's about flights to Texas for the Senator Cruz and others. maybe playing games with that. Just what are you saying? Other than don't flip the House, but I would flip the Senate.
Yeah, I think that that's a very valid concern. There's probably better political prognosticators on the call than I am to quantify the odds of a Senate flip, but that is certainly a concern. I think as one of the things that we're going to continue to do is as the safety challenges become more apparent at DCA, I think you'll see your federal delegation, sort of draw attention to that and make sure the folks know. It's hard to, kind of predict what's going to happen in a future Congress. Certainly that's on the table, and I would say you have Senator Warner's continued partnership in pushing back against those changes, regardless of which party's in charge of the body.
Well, thank you. And Scott put up the slide that got an amazing number of hits on LinkedIn. When you think about the green blob is actually Reagan, and how big that property is compared to where we are. And we didn't even put the fifth runway in, right? I think that's one of the things, having really rolling up my sleeves on the legislative with Committee for Dulles. MWA cannot lobby. And I don't think they think forward about how to leverage our elected officials. I know they work closely with your office and Senator Kane's and others, but I think there's opportunities for us as a civic organization. We've got some legacy in what we've done in Richmond and on the Hill, to think more about how to maybe push for that fifth runway, look at some opportunities. The concourse you mentioned, there's a master plan looking at some changes, but we really need to think even further. The metro really opens it up, makes us feel more Asian, European in terms of traffic. I mean, our metro opportunities with thinking about what that does for us environmentally, getting the cars off the road. I think we can be and lean forward, lean into this about thinking about Dulles as something in the future.
And one other thing on that is, I think, drawing attention to how easy it is to get from Dulles to DC. I think a lot of folks, especially from out of state, don't realize that it's as simple as hopping on a metro line and half an hour, 45 minutes later, you're basically downtown. I think there's this notion that Dulles is a ways out, and to the extent that the local community can help communicate that is in fact not the case, I think it would definitely help us make the case in Congress.
Great, thanks.
Well, it was way. No, I was going to say it was way out there in the boonies when I first went to Dulles from Fairfax City in the 70s, but now it is very short distance. Zack, I'm going to put this out there and get your read. It seems like the last few reauthorizations, as a community, we were reacting to the proposals to add more slots. John McCain caused a problem previous to this reauthorization, might even gone back a little bit further. And I'm wondering if when the next reauthorization comes up, if we not try to fight fire with fire by proposing to reduce the number of flights by a certain amount. Because right now, the delays, the delay time is very high for flights. We do have the safety concerns. And I've talked to pilots, including my brother who flew for Delta and at times flew into DCA. And he said, you guys just need to shut down that airport because it's not a very safe approach. And so I just think, in particular, the next reauthorization, we ought not wait to react, but begin the process to fight. And maybe there will be less temptation to go back and add additional flights, because it's going to come one by one or two by two, and we keep making a bad situation worse. So
yeah, that's an interesting idea, and happy to work with you guys on that. I think it would be nice if the Commerce Committee were led by senators on the eastern side of the country, maybe that would help us out a little bit. McCain, we tend to have, especially when the Republicans are in charge, sort of disproportionate representation at the top of the Commerce Committee on the West Coast. So we'll see on that. I think one of the challenges with that, Scott, is Senator Warner in his first term was a member of the Commerce Committee, but then got onto the Finance Committee, and so not being a member of the committee can sometimes be challenging to get in on the early game there. But happy to work with you and see what's possible as we move forward.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Anybody else? You mentioned Finance Committee. We've got head of a credit union with us today, who's made some comments of concerns about the future economy. We need to be looking forward. And Jeff, I'm not sure if you want to mention, because really the airport is about economic development. 28,000 jobs is MWA's number. And we look at those opportunities. That's where we need to drive. What do they do? Unfortunately, because of housing, the affordable housing, everybody clogs up on 28 because they're driving down to more affordable, attainable housing in Prince William County or out in Fauquier County. But the concern is what happens to the future economy if we get another bump or a bubble. What are some of those concerns? Jeff, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Yeah, my concern is on the financial side is obviously with the Federal Reserve raising rates the way they have, has put a lot of companies at risk, specifically commercial real estate. There's $92 billion of commercial real estate that gets repriced this year. Most commercial real estate loans are done on a 5-year balloon, and those are coming due this year. And that rate that the owners of these buildings are paying, the building's basically empty. It's 20% occupancy, and so they're having difficulty paying the mortgage payment today. And now that mortgage payment is probably going to double because the rate's more than doubled. And the ancillary effect to that is they're not going to be able to pay. And a lot of these community banks are going to start taking hits. We saw where Eagle Bank took a $36 million hit on one property in DC last month. And so that's going to have a trickle down effect across the board as banks start to fail again. So I'm not in the soft landing camp. I think we've got some really serious issues coming. And to John's point, the housing has come to a standstill. The inventory is really light because people are keeping their 3.5% mortgages. They're not willing to sell. And so the inventory's very flat, and we still see aggressive pricing around here. So it's become more and more unaffordable, and people are having to live further out, to John's point, and so the traffic's bottlenecking. So we've got some real challenges because of some of the things that the Federal Reserve has done in trying to fight inflation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jeff. I mean, these are vexing problems that, I worry too about the effect that, some of these repricing in the commercial real estate market is going to have on finances of local government. I mean, so much of local government is from property taxes, is funded by property taxes. And as properties become less valuable, it could be a real headwinds for funding for things like, schools and public safety and transportation as well. So, couldn't agree more. I don't know that, we kind of have the perfect policy solution at the federal level. I think it's going to take probably a combination of state, local, federal policies that'll, kind of put this in the rear view. We'll say the affordable housing issue is probably the #1 issue that Senator Warner hears about around Virginia right now. And it's not just in Northern Virginia. It's not just in our urban areas. It's in our rural areas. It's in every corner of Virginia. Just one quick stat that came out the other day. Today, the median income can afford a mortgage payment of the median home price in 60% of counties in America. 5 years ago, it was 90% of counties in America. So if you want to, look at something that really, I think, quantifies the sort of frustration that people feel with this economy, despite particularly low unemployment, I think that's really it. People feel stuck. People feel like they, can't move. And I think Senator Warner's got a number of proposals around, first-time home buyers and how to make that easier. The LIFT Act, which sort of buys down the interest rate for, first-time home buyers, is one hopefully piece of that solution. But at the end of the day, finding ways to stimulate development of, affordable housing is probably where the answer is. And again, it'll probably take a coordinated approach from all levels of government. I think especially in Northern Virginia, I frequently am, driving down Route 50, for example, and there'll be new townhomes, and they're starting at the 800s, and I'm like, who's going to live right off of Route 50 for 800 grand? But I guess folks are buying them. So, if we are open for business, if you guys have, any suggestions on this, it is a particularly challenging problem. And I do think that, for the balance of this Congress and into the next one, Senator Warner will use his role of the banking committee to, work to put in policies in place that help address this problem. I think looking back at, some of the COVID legislation that passed, that probably is a little bit of a policy regret that we didn't do more on affordable housing at the time, because, it is such a challenging problem right now. So if there's anything the committee has on that front that's working in Loudoun or Fairfax, would love to learn more about it, so we can, find ways to amplify it at the federal level or sort of integrate the two policies.
Hey, Mark, I'm going to have to move on. I apologize. Zach, thank you so much. Exceed our expectations. Please don't be a stranger. Love to have you back to have more in-depth conversation on a couple of these topics that need more time. And actually, and please tell Senator Warner, thank you for all that he does for the community and for the airport. But that was a nice segue over to John Harrison, VP for Development at Comstock. John, a lot of folks can talk about how they support the Metro, what they think about the Silver Line. You guys are out there doing it. You're building buildings, you're making investments, you're taking the risk. And that's all part of you doing the development, figuring out where to go, what to do. We appreciate your support and the fact that you have confidence that we can continue to grow, but interested in your thoughts, especially in light of what we just heard from the senator's office. John?
Sure. So make sure I'm on. Yep. A couple of things. So we have about 1.5 million square feet of development in progress right now. That's a 243 key JW Marriott, first JW Marriott in Virginia, 90 branded condos on top of that. So if you want to live in a condominium unit where you can get room service and maid service and really have an easy life, that's not my sales pitch, but that's what we're up to. A couple of office buildings, one about 250,000 square feet, the other one close to 300,000 square feet. And the larger building has a Vita fitness and health club in it. And then about 420 units of multifamily housing going up high rise that's immediately adjacent to the Metro. I think our business thesis is that kind of highly amenitized first class buildings on top of Metro is a desirable location for a lot of companies. And that's proven out with the likes of Google and Rolls-Royce and ICF and others. I would say, I think just to follow on Zach's, note on the impact of local government of, call it obsolescence of certain office real estate. That's a real thing that the area is facing. And I think that it's not really getting a lot of airtime right now. But I can give you an example. The Tower Club building in Tysons, or the shopping bag building. That building, I think, is assessed for something like $140 or $150 million before COVID, and you can buy it today for 25. So that's happening throughout the region, frankly, because people have figured out work from home is something that their businesses can tolerate, and people just are not renewing office leases, and there's constantly a flight to quality where amenitized buildings and buildings located on top of access or Metro get tenants, and buildings that are, next tier away are struggling. So I think Zach's absolutely right. That's going to be a significant drag on local finances. And I think you're seeing it in central business districts throughout the country, where there's essentially been a flight from office in those areas because people are not going to work, and that ripples through small business and, the ability of transportation services to essentially fund some of their operating costs through ridership. Ridership is still way down. But we're still very much bullish on the Silver Line corridor, and the buildings that we have going are just the second phase of what are probably 4 or 5 phases of development that will ultimately be at the Wheelie Avenue Metro Station. I'd say one other thing that, Zach, that has come out of our current construction project is that we were introduced to a product called Carbon Cure Concrete, and some people have heard us talk about this. We're using about 500,000 cubic yards of concrete in the project, and for those of you who don't know, concrete is one of the most it creates some of the most carbon emissions of any building material you can use. What we've done is essentially, through the concrete manufacturing process, they sequester carbon dioxide gas in the concrete, excuse me. And so we've sequestered about 5 million pounds of carbon in the concrete that's used in the buildings. And that actually increases the strength of the concrete over what your kind of typical concrete would be. And that's equivalent to about 258,000 gallons of gasoline not getting burned. To me, that seems like pretty low-hanging fruit for things that we can do to, reduce carbon emissions, is to capture it, sequester it, put it in concrete. It's not really an additional cost, and it's just a way of doing business that, if you think about how much concrete is used in the region, it could make a huge difference. So there's my plug. And I would say we're, this phase is coming to conclusion. We have one building open, and the remaining parts of the project will open really summer of next year and through the end of the year. And then we should be getting close to starting another building here in Reston, I'd say probably early next year.
That's awesome, John. And what can you talk about Herndon? I know that's sometimes a sensitive subject.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you that the Herndon has been caught in the perfect storm with respect to construction and costs and incomes. And I think if you think generally about sort of an equilibrium that gets established between rental rates, interest rates, costs, those things are in disequilibrium right now, and that's a big contributor to why you're not seeing additional units getting built, is that rents are not high enough to cover the cost escalations that we've had, for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, there's a number of things in our projects that have doubled in cost. And that's not just, that's not the normal wage rate increases, that's materials. And in many cases, that's not slowing down. And so we're working right now with the town to try to get everything aligned to be able to try to kick that project off. But it's a tough hill to climb, to be perfectly candid. It just, the costs have not, some things have dropped and other things continue to run at a pretty good clip. So for example, at one point, lumber was way up and concrete was way up. Those have come down, but all mechanical trades are still up, and the materials for those trades are still way up. One of the things that we face in the development business is that we're competing for labor with all of the data center construction that's going on, and those are great jobs. They're very beneficial projects in our view in a lot of ways, but they suck a lot of capacity out of the labor market and make make the wages go up, which is great for workers and helps them afford higher cost housing, but it makes building the project a lot more difficult.
Yeah, hey,
So
that's great insight. Also curious about, I mean, because you've really taken paid attention to that Silver Line. You've got stuff out in Ashburn for the end of the line. What about up and down 28? Do you see that as a place that's going to continue to grow? And it's really thinking about the airport, right? You've got portions on the south side along 50. You're probably limited on height and what you can do. Is that attractive to you as you go up and down 28? I'm just trying to circle the airport.
sure. I think the kind of the comparable metric that I would offer to you guys is if you think about, I mean, I'm old, so if you have any recollection of what it used to be like to drive from Dallas to Fort Worth, and DFW sort of in the middle, and that area, 30 years ago was like cow pastures. And if you drive that area now, it is densely developed with all kinds of different property types. And I think that if you really look at 28 and 267 and what you should expect in the next 20 years, it's really that. I think it's incredibly attractive to be, near the airport. I think it's going to only continue. The road system going west and the school systems in Loudoun County and Fairfax are going to continue to drive people to locate in this region. And so I don't see anything slowing that process down.
Yeah, John, and when we talk about 28 corridor, because Zack mentioned about Senator Warner being on the Intel committee, we don't talk about Intel. All we know, they do amazing things to help the country for national security. But we got all these quiet professionals that don't get involved in politics, don't show up and talk about the importance of a data center that stores all of our data that we need to have. It's when I almost wish they could be more vocal and talk about, no, I'm doing really important stuff out here, and we need to continue to grow it. But I think the businesses see that, right? Because that's why they're coming to you, asking for those buildings. You got internationally folks coming in and go, no, I need stuff that's close to the Silver Line. I need things that are by some entertainment to live, work, and play. I mean, I just look at it, but it's when I think about the airport, to your point, I'm not seeing the growth around it like I would have expected. It's still kind of often, and we're starting to see more data centers. And I know, probably you don't want to compete with the prices those guys are willing to pay for property sometimes. But how do you balance that with the data centers and what they're doing to the market?
Well, I mean, I think Loudoun County has just taken some really strong steps to try to, plan for the future around the transit on 267. And I think the area is constantly evolving from, buildings that were built 30, 40 years ago till today. And the demand, I just don't see it going down for either tech or government contractors or agencies wanting to be located. The infrastructure is really adjacent to the airport. So, I mean, I think we see that as a big plus. And, our projects are a little bit different in terms of being attractive to those types of tenants, but folks still like as you said, the kind of workshop, play, dine balance of things and creating that amenity space.
And John, people look at the buildings that are not occupied. They go, just convert them into housing, right? You're the pro. Not that easy, right? At some point, where do you look at that conversion versus knocking it down and rebuilding and putting up something fresh? What's the thinking logic on the development piece?
So we've looked at a number of buildings. I mean, and I've looked at converting all kinds of buildings to different uses over time. Starting with, shopping center anchor store buildings. But the real trick is that most office buildings just don't have the floor plan size or floor plate that's consistent with residential development. The depth from the center of the building to the outside wall in an office building is much greater, which means that for the same size apartment, you have an apartment that's like a bowling alley. or you have to create a racetrack around the middle of the inside of the building and an amenity zone on each floor, which you don't get any rent for. So it just doesn't work as often as we'd like it to. I mean, the other thing, just, you know, office buildings typically that you're trying to convert don't have a lot of, you know, their windows are only on, you know, one side of the building. Some of them have very little in terms of window space. And at the time you're doing this, the roof is shot. Most of the outside of the building needs to be renovated in some significant way. Most of the mechanical systems in the building are not appropriate for residential. So when you think about what part of the building you're actually trying to save, it's really the structure of the building is the only thing that you're saving. And so I would suggest to you that it's going to take time for people to realize that the truth is that most of those buildings are just going to come down.
And there's some benefits to that too, right? You can, I've seen different things where they use the concrete and, you know, it's not, and it just, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, 30-year, 40-year-old buildings, it's, you know, we're looking at different standards, and taking them down and starting fresh is actually a pretty positive thing.
Right. I mean, and that's, you know, to get to folks' point about affordable housing, I mean, you know, to rezone a project in Fairfax County now is probably 2.5 years. And 2.5 years didn't seem like a long time when interest rates were, you know, 2%, when they're, you know, 7 or 8 on a development loan. 2 years on a good sized piece of property note and your own money starts to add up to a lot of money. So I think there's certainly things that can be done across the country, but it's as simple as things like speed and what are the development impositions that the community is asking for to build a building. We've come through 20 years of really, really good times, and we've layered on, you know, request after request after request after request, and all of those seem like abundantly reasonable to the community. And it works great as long as everything continues to go in that direction. But we've had, you know, we're in disequilibrium right now.
Yeah, great comments, John. Thank you so much. You know, Gretzky talks
My pleasure.
about don't skate to the pucks, skate to where the puck's going. And what we heard from John and Zack is where the puck's going, right? This is what we're trying to do. This is why we belong to Committee for Dallas, to get that insight, to figure out how to understand the thinking about different businesses and institutions and how they're thinking, because we're trying to make some decisions about workforce, about, you know, investments in the airport, about that 5th runway, about the transportation networks. And so, you know, we certainly have our work cut out for us. Thank you, Scott, for your leadership. And I really appreciate it. We've got, talking about the future, we've got our next meeting is going to be a joint meeting where we're going to talk about cargo that Scott set up. Scott, do you want to give us a plug for that and get us off the stage?
Absolutely. And first, John, thank you very much. And thank you to Comstock for being a diamond sponsor of our golf tournament this past April, and for being a sponsor at our Towers of Award dinner at last November. We certainly appreciate the support. On July, what was the date again, John? 12th, I think. Let me pull up, because I'm always good at giving the wrong dates with all the various meetings I have to coordinate. July 10th, we do it at 8 o'clock. We're doing a joint Zoom meeting with the Transportation and Economic Development Committee. We have a gentleman from the Virginia partnership coming to talk about what they are doing to do a study to look at having cargo as a main business at Dulles Airport. This is something that we have talked about for years and years, but have never gotten off the ground. this gentleman is coming to speak has experience in the cargo industry and understands it. And they are pulling together a study that will hopefully show at the end of this study that Dulles is a viable option to have cargo come in and ship out from. So I hope you will join us for that. You'll be able to see in our newsletter the link that you can use to register for attendance. It's free. We just need you to register so we can get you the Zoom link to the meeting. And I think it's going to be very, very enlightening, because if they're able to, at the end of the day, to accomplish what they hope to do, this will be excellent news for Dulles in the future, for additional business out there at IAD. So.
Well, thanks, Scott. Appreciate everybody joining us, John and Jack, John and Zach, for presenting. And the more folks we have, the better a meeting we can have. So thank you all for being part of it. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Hey, Mark, can we get the word out to the chamber about this June or July 10th meeting? Because I think many on there may be interested in the topic itself.
Absolutely. Send me over what you want. We'll put it in our newsletter.
All right. Sounds good, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
everybody.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.